Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody. This is a session for talking about future of regulation, inshallah. As we know, emerging technology is driving new businesses and services. Government must adapt this quickly by creating and modifying and enforcing regulation. In this session, inshallah, we will shed the light upon the future of regulation and how the government will handle this responsibility to protect their citizen and user and to ensure having fair market while enabling this necessary space for innovation. Today, inshallah, I will introduce my guest who will speak in this in depth, having Ms. Natalia Gordesishvi, and having Zoran Jordanoski to having speak about this session, inshallah. I will start with you, Natalia. Let's start with explaining how the advancement of technology will affecting the regulation, how the business model will shift, what is necessary business model changes should be there. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. This is my pleasure to be today with you and speak about digital transformation process and legislative enabling frameworks in order to make the adaptive technologies to be efficient, effective, user-friendly. And my cases will be directed from my personal background, my professional background, from Georgia, from Eastern Partnership countries. There are a lot of questions that technology people are addressing to lawyers. And the first question, and not only technology guys, but also the politicians and business people asking, do we need regulatory frameworks as such? Does it matter to have enabling digital ecosystem? And my answer to that is straightforward. We can just say that success in digital transformation definitely require to have the adequate legal basis. Sometimes from the countries with the traditional lawmaking process, we see that when we assess and make the feasibility studies, it seems that traditional lawmaking is not supportive to modern, paperless, digital-friendly, virtual processes. Very often, archaic laws obstruct digital transformation projects. And for us as legal professionals, it is very, very important to remove the legislative and regulatory barriers. This is a priority for any digital transformation reform in order to support the uptake of digital government and transformation of public service delivery. Development of enabling e-friendly legal framework is absolutely necessary for the online provision of services, online interactions, innovative technology adaptation, both in government as well as in the private sectors. Very often, again, there is a battle between law and technology, and we think, what is first? What is the superior over another, law or technology? Ideally, they have to complement one another. Technology and law should complement each other because both of them are key components and enablers of digital transformation. It would be very good if legal departments, lawyers start examining the applicable legislation ex ante before the technological processes are launched, or if not ex ante, during the process of the technology advancement and when the new services and new business models are in place. Law is not only regulatory in its role, but it's facilitative as well. With its regulatory law, legal background is for evaluation of innovations. We evaluate how innovations fit into our legislative frame, into countries' constitutional background. With the facilitative role, legal background is a tool for introducing new technologies. But as said before, technology is not the superior over law, but vice versa. Both of them are the key components, key complementary parts for digital transformation process. If we speak about how we should start, or what are the milestones for screening and evaluating our legal system, I should advise that what we have to do is start with the simple, clear, and interpretation-free norms. Whatever new stuff we have in place should not be ambiguous, but very straightforward. And here is the example that speaking that online interactions have the same legal value as the physical one. Legal equivalence of or digital with paper-based processes, electronic equals paper or digital equals physical, is the key legal principle that we have to envisage in our legislation. Also, very importantly, it is important to have the consistency with the whole of government approach with different sector-specific regulations. So if by constitution, by the supreme legislation, we have the principle that everything available online has the legal value with the timestamp, with the digital signature or so on, it should not be silos in different sector-specific legislation saying that, for instance, only paper copies are available and have the legal force. Collaboration in all government levels are important. Data reuse of infrastructure, commonly handled digital infrastructure, data exchange platforms is key for the legislation to consider. Definitely, the law is not set up for regulated technology. It's not a right approach, but vice versa is a mistake made by many countries, including the one which I represent. So we are not regulating technology. We are regulating the communication. We are regulating the services, but we never put technology-specific stuff in the legislation. For instance, Georgia right now has the blockchain in many public services, but we never mention blockchain there. But we regulate like e-abstract has the legal value and how the legal value is envisaged, but not whatever technology we use for that. Legal controlling powers is crucially important for the trust and uptake for e-services and digital technologies. Because with the openness, with the freedom of expression, with this human rights in digital ecosystem is one stuff, but ensuring the personal data protection and the enforcement mechanism attached to that is the second. So having this legal controlling power matters a lot. And the country should make the balance between online privacy and security versus openness and access to information. Now, by our...
Natalia, it's dragged me with a question. What is the right speed or right balance that government should ensure minimum level of controls according or related to the legal ecosystem?
Many thanks for the question. With the balance, I will start with the constitutional principle we have in our Georgian constitution saying that access to information and access to internet resources is a basic human right of Georgia. And we have this named in our constitution, while personal data protection and ensuring of privacy, both digitally as well as in the physical ecosystem, is again the human right. So how we balance that, you may ask us. The balance is that whatever cybersecurity role authorities have, they have to consider that they can't overcome the privacy. They can't overcome and process personal data without authority or without due legislative basis. This is the constitutional principle. And for the controlling powers, we have the independent personal data protection authority who can go make the audit and even punish law enforcement who are not, in case they are not following the constitutional principle. This is what I meant with the balance of privacy and cybersecurity with openness and access to information. If I may continue as well, there is a need to have the golden ratio between having a lot of laws in place and quick modifications, because if we modify the laws very frequently, as soon as the technological advancement is in place, we may have very ambiguous and non-predictable legal systems. So how we have to ensure the sustainability of the legal principles? For that, what is an international best practice that key principles, key horizontal provisions are put on the high legislative base, while in subnormative acts, we have more procedural and process-oriented stuff. So, for instance, I say that cybersecurity has to be the key priority for the government and critical infrastructures, while what services we do for that are in the ministerial orders. At the same time, we have to distinguish between soft regulatory rules and the mandatory regulations. The principles how we do that with government to government, government to citizen, government to business transactions, we have more stricter regulations, while we ensure that there are much flexibility with the private sector's communication, online and service provision thereby. So standards on high legislative level, technological norms in more subnormative levels, more mandatory rules for government, more flexibility to the civil society and the private agencies. At the same time, when we have the digital ecosystem, every time there is a risk of errors, risk of some kinds of ambiguous mechanisms and the bags and so on and so on. That's why due control and monitoring mechanisms should be ensured by legislation on a highly proactive manner. Very often we have mistakes made in legal system, and hereby I mention some of them. We don't need to have the parallel legislation for and something different for the physical ecosystem. Vice versa, this is a big mistake made by many countries. We have to have the same legislation, same bodies of law, but with some specific stuff what we have with about about digital, about disruptive business models. And hereby I say that we don't have civil law or administrative law different for digital, but we name that whatever administrative agencies, ministries, and public sector is doing offline, the same rights and obligations and authorities they have in the online ecosystem. This is a key enabling principles, and then we don't repeat it in each and every law. The same about criminal legislation. So we don't say that bribery is different from the bribery, or crimes against health and life of humans are different online or different offline. We have the same criminal legislation, but having just several articles based on the Budapest Convention, which we envisage in the Criminal Code of Georgia as such. We have to get rid of every kind of ambiguous rules of institutional responsibility. We don't need to reinvent a new wheel, because when we are starting screening our legislation to make it e-friendly, e-ready, we have to see what international best practices are, but we don't just copy these practices, but we analyze existing local legal environment and adapt international best practice into our local needs. Every time.
Yeah, I think this is very, very good point you're raising. Actually, here in KSA, we're facing this issue that we look into international best practices, and we do a lot of benchmarks, but nothing to be customized or localized upon our local environment. What is your advice in this term? What we should do?
I would definitely advise to have a lot of local legal support. And I will give you the practical example. I'm coming from Georgia, the country which was high in corruption. Everything was very bureaucratic in government sector, and we had a lot of this administrative burden of corruption. Just having streamlined legislation was not enough. Just if we took the EU legal acquis and transformed into Georgia, that was not enough. We needed our own safeguards, our own legal considerations. And for that reasons, every time we had the EU expert advising us to just push forward, we were looking at our local risks, about our local challenges, and maybe not 100% take the advice, but transform or change or modify these advices with our local needs. For many times we had timestamps or the stamps addressed to the documents. As for EU countries, it was an extra mandatory requirement, and they were saying us, you don't need it, it's extra step. But we've seen that it was required in order to be safe that some government officials were not wrongfully abusing their powers. So every time I would recommend that definitely we don't need to reinvent a new wheel, because a lot of already good international practice is available, and some countries have done whatever we are maybe doing now, and having their wrong stuff and good stuff as an experience is good for us. But every time examine how you can locally transform that into practice. Again, good idea for that. I myself have written in the legislation that court should consider any electronic document as an evidence if it is signed with qualified electronic signature. EU experts were telling me, but you don't need to have it, have this provision there, because out of other provisions, it is obvious. But considering that courts or judges may be reluctant to taking legal evidence and attaching it to a legal value, I have seen that it may have more problematic not having this provision in the legislation. So I have this explicit wording for the judges in our e-signature law. So every time my advice would be, look at this, look at that more thoroughly, not just copying what is an advice coming from the any country, including myself, my one. And with this, I don't want to take much time, and also speak a little bit about the legal techniques, how we approach disruptive technologies with legal techniques. Again, you can have many examples and many EU countries or international countries telling you that introduce one new law or modify existing ones. There, and my reply to that would be, there are no single right approach. Some countries opting having single e-government acts. Some countries, like myself, my country as well, we have multiple legal regulations. And what is most important, that you have to introduce new laws as well, like we've done with e-signature act, with personal data protection act, with cybersecurity and information security acts, because these branches of law have not been existing before. But at the same time, with introducing new laws, we modified quite a lot existing traditional legal systems with the new provisions, with e-friendly legal provisions there. But last but not least, with digital transformation, with disruptive technologies, you have to tackle different branches of law, starting with the constitutional law, with administrative regimes and administrative legislation, as well as with the civil and contractual and more soft regulations. And hereby, I enlisted for you some of the principles or some of the legal directions that are necessary in order to make the legislation ready for digital transformation. I think I have not taken too much of your time right now. Thank you. And I'm absolutely ready for the questions.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you. And of course, you have more than 15 years experience in government and developing ICT policy and all of this stuff, especially with the European legalization. Thank you very much for this. Back to you, Zoran. If you give us like more insight about the security and privacy of data and the role of regulation and government, what they should do in this aspect.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me for this session today. I believe it will be very helpful for the government officials and we'll touch very important points about the digital transformation, not just in the public sector, but general in the society. If you allow me, before starting to focus on the second two key aspects of today's event, I will refer very briefly to some points that the questions that were raised. I used the opportunity to create one very informative slide about freedom of information and how this can be.
Go ahead. This is the purpose of this session. Yeah.
And how this can be. I agree with all what Natalia said. Just to be more clear for the audience, I think seeing this in a presentation mode can be very helpful. So access to public sector information, there are some principles that are really good to be known. So what this means that every citizen in the country can go and knock on the government door and say, I want to have information about what information you have about me, what policies you and decision you made. I want to know what you're going to build in my neighborhood. You will build a kindergarten, you will build a school, you will build a hospital, you will build a park. So explanation is not necessary. Everyone can go and knock on the government's door and say, I want to know what you plan for the next year or for the next 10 years. There are some limited grounds for refusal. Of course, it's listed here. It's classified information, it's ongoing proceedings or intellectual property. And when it comes to that balance, when the government can say, no, I'm not giving you this information, if that information contains a personal data. And there we are calling a test and balance between the public interest and the personal data. For example, if you want and say, can you please give me the name of my neighbor who is building the house here? Then they might say, okay, sorry, it's a contain personal data, but we're not giving this to you. But if you know that someone constructs something illegally or doing some illegal activities, and you think that the public interest is bigger than the private interest, you can go and say, can you please give me the information about? Or for example, let's put it this way: there was some problem with that property. Some floods might come in and can endanger the whole neighborhood, and say, please give me the contact details of the owner, and I want to contact him to come here to solve the problem. Then they can disclose the personal data of the owner of that property. So basically, when contains personal data, always need to be balanced. If the public interest prevails, then you will give the information. If you think that the private interest and the privacy prevails, then we'll not disclose the information. It was just very briefly before starting.
Yeah, yes. What key data points are crucial to regulate to keep citizens safe from being exploited or manipulated or taken advantage because of the new technologies?
When it comes to this specific rule, and KSA already adopted the interim regulations for freedom of information, it gives very powerful tool to all the citizens from one side, but also makes the government more transparent and more open to citizens. So there is no more justifiable reason for the government to say we are not giving you this information, because we don't want. Yes, it's public information, and all the governments and all the citizens can have that information on demand, on request, upon request. If you request to know some, you can go to Ministry of Health and ask, what do you plan for the next year? Will you open school in my neighborhood or not? So it's all public. It should be all the access to public sector information should be very easy, and the government will be more transparent. So if you need to choose some words here, will be they basically transparency, accountability of the government. And this comes to another question. It's not part of today's topics, but I will raise it because it's very specific. The second part of this coin of public sector information is the reuse of the public sector information. You know, the open data, and when government published the data on open data portal. In Macedonia, we went like 10 steps further, and how the government become more accountable. So nowadays in the open government platform, Open Finance, you can go and see where the Ministry of Finance or Education or Health spent the money yesterday, not 2 years ago. So you will see what restaurants the minister used, where he refueled the car, what hotels he went, where the money. So basically, it's pretty much 100% openness of all the public costs. So no more secrets, and the government officials are afraid to spend the money that are not justifiable. When they saw that some of the ministers 5 years ago, when they went on an official trip to Paris, spent so many money on shopping, you know how was the tension in the country. So access to public sector information, it's a very powerful tool that the new technology brings to citizens on one side, but also make the government and government officials more accountable on how they are, what they are doing with all the policies.
Well, it sounds interesting. So as a citizen or as a user, how I should know what information it should sold to third party, and what government should do to protect me from selling this kind of information?
You're referring now to access to public sector information as a citizen that wants to get information, or as a citizen that you want to be sure that the government will not give your information to anyone? Because
yes, the citizen part. The citizen part.
Yeah, from the first part, as a citizen, you are empowered to knock on the government door, either any communication channel, and ask about anything. As a citizen part, that government have information about you, you are protected by the other part of the regulation on the coin. It's the privacy and data protection regulation, for which I plan to explain a little bit more in the next period. So from one side you have rights as a citizen, but on the other side, the data protection legislation protects you, that the government will not just give your information to anyone, not just the government, any other company that or party that have information about you. But we will touch that points more deeply.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so thank you, Natalia, for touching the first two very important aspects about regulation. I will try to focus in the next 10 minutes on security, privacy, and data, and leave 5 minutes for the fourth topic, regulation and SACOT. I think both are very relevant and very important nowadays. Security, privacy, data, it's all used interchangeably, but few of us have question about what is privacy and what is data protection. Speaking about privacy, it's a more psychological concept about what we consider to be privacy for us doesn't mean that it's privacy for the other people. If I'm not afraid of showing my picture from my vacation, for me that might not be endangering the privacy, but for someone else that can be considered as a privacy violation. Speaking for data protection, is a set of rules, it's a system designed to address all the stages from the collection and the use of the data of the individuals, and how those who collect the data, like controllers and the one who process the data, what should they do? So the first, it's very important to distinguish these two concepts. Nowadays, the data are the most powerful resource, no doubt over that. Who has the data, has the right information, can make the right decision, can grow the business, can can do anything that is correct. So having the data, it's very powerful. But not all data it's a personal that we fall under protection on the data protection regime. So speaking here for the data, we can distinguish personal of non-personal data, and a third category data that falls under the personal data, which is sensitive data, which requires very high level of security measures. Now, for those that are not aware of what is personal data or what fall under of the personal data category, it's pretty much everything. Every information that directly or indirectly can identify some person or it's considered as a personal data. So basically, most of the data that government and all the private entities have in their possession contain personal data and fall under this regime. Everything that you can imagine: address, mobile number, email address, IP address, everything falls under personal data. On the other side, the categories that requires higher protection are some special categories of sensitive data, like data about race, ethnicity, physical, mental health, memberships, religious or philosophical beliefs. And every time I got the questions, why this data are chosen as a special categories, because trade union membership might not mean anything to someone, but all these data are chosen because if these data are disclosed to some companies or some entities, this individual can be subject to discrimination, and we've seen that a lot. So companies don't want to hire different race, different ethnicity, people from different religious or people that have some mental or physical history. So these categories of data are pretty much restricted and not, and their collection and processing is strictly regulated. So not everyone can, even nowadays, if you fill application for, especially in Europe, in the European Union for job or for anything, all these questions will not be asked, or if you've been asked, you're able to refuse to answer this. For example, on the other side, in the United States, it's normal in the application to declare your race. So again, we're speaking for different regimes, but European Union nowadays is considered these special categories of sensitive data as a highly protected and highly valued. Now, to have a comprehensive system for data protection, what do we need? We need one general framework, one general regulation in the country. Currently, KSA adopted the interim regulations for data protection. For now, it's a good starting point, but it's far from enough. It needs to be mandatory general data protection legislation that will regulate pretty much most of the aspects, like what are the individual's rights, what are the mechanisms to protection if someone violate my privacy or rights to data protection. Where
this is a good point you're raising, Zoran. If someone harm my, I know that they utilize my data.
Yes.
Falsely or take advantage of my data. What should I do? Where to go? I don't have let me say enough awareness where to go. What is the mechanism? What is the procedure?
Yes, I'm always getting similar questions, and it's a very valid point. When I'm giving this kind of presentations, usually it's sometimes teaching class for government officials. I'm asking, please get outside of the shoes of the government officials. Forget that you're government officials, and just be a citizen. Just think about what will happen if something goes wrong. Do you know where, on what door to knock, where you can submit a complaint, how to protect your rights? All these questions must be answered in the data protection general regulation. So it must designate a data protection authority that will have controls, mechanism controls to control all the entities, including the government entities and including the private entities. For any moment to be able to go to make a regular inspection to see how they're doing, what they're doing with the data, how they collect, how they process, are they selling the data, are they doing something wrong with the data, and upon request of citizen, if a citizen have some some issue, some problem with some company or government entities, they can knock on the door of Data Protection Authority and submit a complaint. That's why this general data protection legislation must be very strict, must be very good design, and to enable all the citizens to execute their rights, and on one side, but on the other side, to have a very comprehensive framework in the country to stop all these manipulations that happen with data, and happens a lot. Even in Europe, even nowadays, GDPR is fully in force. We can still see some of this. So this general data protection legislation doesn't give the answer to all the questions. That's why we need sectoral legislation, like Ministry of Health need to develop their sectoral legislation, where it says hospitals can collect this data, private hospitals can collect this data, or Ministry of Education, universities can collect or must collect this data. So general legislation gives the framework where all the other sectoral legislation needs to move in. Just as an example, why this is important, being in Macedonia, like dealing with security, privacy and security issues, we got some casinos in the neighborhood area between Macedonia and Greece. And when we went there to make inspection, the owner said, sorry, how much is the fine? Oh, 5,000 euro. Okay, I will pay every day 5,000 euro to use and will not comply with the rules. GDPR nowadays imposes fines up to 4% of the global turnover. After adoption of GDPR, the same guy called us, guys, can you please come and help us with this? We will pay as much as possible, because 4% of their global turnover annually means a lot. And nowadays we can see fines imposing by European countries to Google, like 4 billion euros, Italy fining Amazon for 1.4 billion euros. It's a massive. So that's how the question about data protection is treated nowadays, and it's very strict. That's why most of the countries in the world, and more than 50% are following the standard and the model that GDPR from the European Union imposed. And nowadays, GDPR is considered as a gold standard for regulating on how to regulate these issues. Just to touch some points, I guess there will be multiple questions, like right of the individuals. It's all regulated. We as individuals have to be right to be informed who is getting our data, what does with our data, how long we'll keep our data, is giving to someone else, or right to access. I can go and say, can you tell me what data you have about me, what you're doing with my data, or right to rectification. Yes, I'm not member in your club. I want for you to delete all my data. I don't want to store my data anymore. Right to object processing. If I don't want to be anymore part of your club or your company, or I don't want to be your customer anymore, please stop processing my data, or restrict processing. Please, what is nowadays very common, please do not send me any more spams. Do not send me emails with your fancy products. I don't want to see this. I want to unsubscribe for your list. Data portability. I can take all the data that you have about me and move to another operator. Right to be forgotten, very powerful tool that the citizen nowadays can have in Europe, especially after the Google case, can always go and say, please, I want you to forget about me. I don't want you to store any more data about me. And the last right is the right about the use of artificial intelligence, profiling, and automated decision making. There are some principles on the other side that must be followed by the governments and all private entities on how they can store the rules. Must be lawfully processed, must be legal ground. They must process within the limitations. So if I collect the data about one purpose, I cannot use for 3 other purposes, or I cannot just like that resell the data. Must be accurate, not be kept longer than necessary. If you need, if you have a goal to, once you achieve the goal, you must delete the data. You cannot keep the data forever. And that was our biggest challenge, especially with law enforcement authorities, police, courts. No, you cannot keep the data forever. If something happened like 40 years ago, I should not have the consequences. Yeah, I was in prison like 40 years ago, but after 40 years ago, I'm a completely new person. Why should this data appear in my profile that I was in prison? Because I will never find a job or get any government benefits. And all these principles about how we keep secure and the transfers. I prepared some slides about security measures. Maybe we can touch if necessary about who is the weakest or the biggest part in when it comes to security in one organization, technology, processes, and the people. Just very rare example. We went to a bank, regular inspection, and we wanted to say what they do with the data. And they show us very fancy policies, very good procedures. Everything was super nice. And suddenly we just wanted to do a random check. Can you open please this office? We want to visit this official. And what we saw, a password written and sticked on the monitor. And that's a data breach. Everyone can have, you can pay millions of euros in your technology, in your process development and everything. If you do not train people and do not raise the awareness of this, your system is very vulnerable. So that's why we are saying invest in people.
It always starts with people and finish with people. If people don't adopt those kind of regulations and awareness,
we did another example. We before going to inspection to a bank, we throw on the floor a 4 terabyte USB drive. And one employee just found it. Oh, so I'm super happy I found 4 terabyte USB drive. Once he plugged in the computer, it was malfunction code in the background. We got notified. That's how we did penetration test. And so, sorry guys, but your procedures are not well. So it's always investing in people and raising the awareness about the privacy and all these security measures. Data breach, we can talk a lot, happens every day. It's not a problem if it happens, if it's problem if someone hides it. The most important is to disclose it to relevant authorities and to individuals. Like we got every day messages from the companies that had that data breach, like, please consider changing your password. Something might goes wrong in our database, which is fine and correct. Data protection is all over the emerging technologies. There are so many clashes nowadays, but the countries and innovators working on how to find a solution. You can touch anyone that you want of the emerging technologies, and they still have some challenges to comply with data protection regulation. I will be
now it's to the last topic of today's
I will be very brief. Regulation is a code. We are moving in another dimension of having the digital transformation. Now we have all the rules written in natural language. Imagine a world where most of the rules are written as a code. Will be super easy and super friendly ecosystem. Just read the norm in the left side and read the norm in the right side. Pure legal writing, and then if rule is written as a code, then you can have easy interpretation about what these rules means. What are the benefits? Through the logical thinking, yes or no, true or false, written code norms, we can increase the quality of the legislation, will be more clear, more transparent, simpler to understand even for non-lawyers, and will allow us to test the rules through the simulations. Accessibility, if we have an open code and everyone can take it and can implement in their local softwares, then we can have the rules applied consistently across all the government and non-government entities. Consistency through this regulation as a code, we can imagine an example now. Just to be more clear, companies are translating the natural language legislation into code for their purposes. For example, yes, they take the process for tax payments and put it in their local software, and they have the software, they have the code. If something happened, the government changed the legislation, they need to go back, do the hard coding, and again adjust the software, update the software to the new regulations. It will take some time. It's time consuming and imposes definitely costs. Imagine that the government from the beginning developed the legislation in a machine readable form, then the companies will not be anymore in a position to translate the human language into a code, and this will also avoid the risks, because sometimes your interpretation is that you need to pay in 15 days from getting the decision, but can be 15 days from adoption of the decision, which can be slightly different day. For service delivery, code regulation as code also will increase what Natalia spoke about, having a friendly ecosystem. Regulation as a code will boost the service delivery. So imagine that you're applying for government service and immediately getting the results. So basically having automated or semi-automated application for service delivery. And the last slide here is about the challenges. For all those that are lawyers, know that the world is not black and white. There are always norms that are subjective and always need human interpretation. Always there will be may or could in the legislation, because we cannot just rely on automation and the software, for example, when it comes to adoption. Yes, we can have the rules, checklists, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. But at the end, human intervention and interpretation should always be necessary to assess the family whether they should adopt this kit or should not adopt this kit. So always there will be some norms that will not be able to subject to regulate or write in a machine readable form. It's a complicated process. It's not an easy process to translate all the regulation into a code. There are some examples around the world from New Zealand, Australia, Canada, France, where some legislation is tried to be written in a code like tax law, but it's still far from having a very good practice to be distinguished around the world. And drafting application of this will require multidisciplinary teams. So no longer only drafters with legal background or experts from the field will necessary, but they need to work with coders, with programmers, and to simultaneously draft the legislation. Nowadays, it's difficult to translate this current legislation because this is written in a very much for another time. But for all the new legislation, drafting into this multidisciplinary way can help a lot to have better regulations. So basically, this I consider as a last stage of having the friendly ecosystem with regulations.
I have a question regarding the software that you talk about it and how technology. Okay. To what extent can technology benefit regulators by using software to draft new regulations?
See, it's not about the software. Currently, you will not find any software that is designed where you can simply put your text or write your legal text and immediately transfer into a code. It's a process that is curatively testing, like distinguishing the basically regulation as a code is a methodology. We cannot see it as a product. It's a methodology. How you're starting with the key concept on what are the key elements in the legislation. For example, employment law, like employees and employer. So distinguishing these two categories, then taking a section about, let's say, annual leave. And for the annual leave, you're taking the whole section and put it into a code and say the employee is entitled to have annual leave if he works at least 6 months at this employer. And then you have coded this. Does the employees work at least 6 months? Yes or no? If yes, then he's entitled to have 24 days annual leave. If no, then the process goes somewhere else. So basically, it's not very simple. It's very complicated process. where really need to go through the core text of the law and to try to translate it, all the processes into machine readable form, into a code. Nowadays, you cannot find any software that it's a kind of a magic tool then where put the family law and after reading it, will translate it into a code. But it will require manual work, going through it, and at the end testing it, because some of the things might not be coded well. There are examples, especially in Canada and Australia and New Zealand, where they tested some of the legislation. But again, they come to these challenges where not everything can be coded. How can you code the norm where it says the employer may? It's not yes or not, so it's very open and subject to interpretation. But again, it's a powerful tool that is explored nowadays, and I believe will be one of the topics in the next 10 years. So if the private companies can translate the legislation into their local softwares, why the government cannot do that from the beginning?
Great. I'm not sure if I have question from the audience. Let me give them like 2 minutes to write their questions.
Anyway, let me just summarize. If there are some questions as a follow-up, I have left my email, and I guess you will disclose with participants Natalia's email as well. The 4 topics are very broad. For all of them, we can speak 1 week. If they're more interested about going deeper into some of the topics.
Yeah, Zoran, I have a question regarding what type of capability I should learn or gain to handle the future of regulation, or to go more toward the future of regulation. I like this question.
Sorry. Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, what kind of skill set or capability as an employee, as a government employee, to develop myself toward the future of the regulation?
Nowadays, it's currently very, it's a new trend. It's very fancy. Nowadays, you can have both options. Either you be a lawyer, but with significant advanced ICT skills and knowledge. Or you can be ICT professional, doesn't need to be programmer, but IT professional, but with very good knowledge of public administration and the legal system in the country. So no, you will not see nowadays profiles that works in this area that are specified only in the law or only in the IT. Merging these two, and there are multidisciplinary master studies where you're getting a degree at the end called IT lawyer. It's nowadays very interesting. And just to throw the ball as an interest, just open the LinkedIn jobs and just type GDPR. Thousands of jobs and positions are all open, and all of them require to have either legal background with knowledge of IT or your IT with significant legal knowledge.
If I also may add to what Zoran said, it is also very much important to work together as a team with the legal and IT guys together. So in my case, when we were developing the single portal of e-services, I, as a lawyer with the IT background, was sitting within the same table with the IT professionals and with business analysts, and together we were developing the new services with the digital by default, with the privacy and personal data constraints, with the public administration requirements. So it is very much, it's not only now lawyer stuff to write laws or just write contracts. It's a multidisciplinary group, and whatever theoretical background we can have from the new IT legal courses, we have to practice this within the team. And I very much advise to legal personnel to work very closely with the IT guys and the business analysts together. This is crucially important for e-services, for cybersecurity, for personal data protection, for any field of digitalization. And start it by default, not just upgrade in the future, but whenever you are now doing new service, new case management, everything, start from scratch and start working together from the beginning.
Yeah, and if I may just add few more words here. Always it's good to learn from the bad cases, bad examples that someone else did. I remember being in a part of the Data Protection Authority where the Ministry of Health representative came with a project just from us to say yes, it's fine. And they bought like for 10 million euros fingerprint devices for all the hospitals in the country. And we said, sorry, this is not according to the data protection rules. You cannot use this. And they said, but what should we do now with all the equipment? Do whatever you want. You have to come and ask me and consult with us in front, not at the end. So it's always to start from the beginning to make all the necessary consultations. We are living nowadays in a world where each sector cannot be just standalone. It's always need to see the bigger picture and to work with other government authorities. Either it's for drafting laws or for pure project implementation. So it's always good to have upfront the right person consulted whatever you're doing as a government entity.
Great session. Thank you. And I want to extend my thanks to the guest having today. Zoran, you have a great experience holding a PhD in international law, working in UN e-government university, having a lot and long experience in digital transformation and organization. Thank you, Natalia. You've been helpful for a lot of similarity here in KSA. Thank you very much, my audience. And last words from you guys, if you want to add anything.
Okay, I'll start. It was my pleasure being today distantly and speaking about very important issues for all countries in the world, because privacy, personal data protection, cybersecurity, digital transformation, these issues are new for everyone, for every country. And I think for the sessions like this, we learn from each other. And it's my pleasure to share the practice I have for now as well as in the future. Thank you again.
Thank you, Natalia. Zoran?
Okay, thank you again for inviting us to be part of this session. I'm very much supportive of this kind of informal sessions, because it's very important to get attention from the people, to raise the awareness about importance, and of course always to open to debate. So it was my pleasure to be here. I very much like the initiative that you have, like annual weekly sessions about different topics. And I believe that some of these sessions you can plan it for the next year, because there are always new things to be said about privacy and data protection. So whatever was said last year, believe me, is updated this year. So there are always new trends and new challenges happening around the world. And again, I'm very happy because when first I was dealing, and I will be super honest here, the first recommendation I ever wrote in a report when was for KSA was adopt data protection legislation and establish data protection authority. I still remember it was my very first, when I did initial assessment of the country, was please do this and do this. This is not my wish, it's the best for all the citizens.
Appreciate your recommendation for sure. Thank you guys, thank you ideas, and have a nice day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
All the best.